To this. I thought this was going to be an easy panel. It's not. I need every single minute, including the extra 15 I'm about to take now, so strap in. I am not going to introduce myself. We don't have the frickin' time. Contents. What is dungeon mastering, period? I'm going to go over the baseline skills of what you are going to be expected to do in this role and how exactly, what kind of mindset you should have going into this hobby. Next up, we have the 3 pillars of play. I'm going to call them as narrative, roleplay, and encounters. These are your 3 jobs beyond the first thing that I'm going to describe. And then finally, I'm going to walk each and every one of you through picking a system, why you might want something or another, and what tools and systems are available out there that may be of interest to you, not just Dungeons & Dragons. Even though I am using the term DM, I'm using that term very liberally here. So, also, I see some people already taking out their phones, taking pictures of the presentation and stuff like that. There is going to be a link to everything at the end on a QR code. So take your time. I'm trying to have as long of a QA as possible because every year I do this, it's a massive QA. And I did the advanced stuff first, and now I'm like, what would we do if someone knew literally nothing about this? Wow, this is a lot of information. Okay, let's get into it. What is a dungeon mastery in the first place? Primarily, it is going to be leadership. You are the person who organizes the group to play. You are the person who needs to identify patterns in the scheduling and hold to it. If the pattern overall between all of your players changes, maybe you're in school, maybe you're out of school, people get laid off, people get fired, people change jobs. All of these things can change the schedule. Try to be aware of that and do your best to accommodate. But also, if one person just doesn't feel like showing up, one person got sick, run the game anyway. It's your call, you're the DM. The reason I'm emphasizing this is because a lot of first-time dungeon masters I find are a little bit concerned or wary of taking leadership and ownership of the thing. They're like, oh, well, I don't want to exclude anyone. I don't want to, I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to play. You don't necessarily always get to make that call. You decide whether or not there's going to be a game that day, and you should set the expectation that you are going to do what you say that you will do, not because someone else decided to screw off. So also, you are made to set the scenes in play. You have to describe the environment and the starting conditions of whatever scenario the players will begin into. That will be expanded upon a lot more later, but understand you set the stage and the players are the actors. They are the ones who determine where you go next, but you are the point zero of any campaign. Finally, you are also to rule on the rules. You need to be knowledgeable about the game and understand how it works, what the rules are, but you don't need to know everything. By God, again, so many people are like, no, I need to memorize the entire 1,000-page rulebook of just core Dungeons & Dragons. No, please, I haven't done that yet. I've been doing this for decades now. Please, do not feel that you need to overwhelm yourself. Understand that the rules are usually set up in a way that you can look them up later when they're actually important. And there's usually a rules lawyer in every group who will let you know when you've screwed up the rules. So, not your job to have perfect memory. Just understand the basic concepts like how does a combat work? What is an exploration like? How are characters generally made? You're 90% of the way there. Don't worry too much about it. And also just understand what makes choices interesting. People love these crazy role-playing games because of the utter freedom that they allow your players to have. Anyone can do anything, be anyone. What does that mean in the context of the story, of the world we're building? What makes things interesting is number one, what you should be concerned with the most if this is a hobby you want to begin to indulge into. Now, I'm going to teach you how to speak, all right? It's not enough to just have words and syllables and questions and all that other jazz. I want to specifically let you be efficient and also let other people speak. Because once again, there's you and then 4 actors that you're trying to corral to do the things that you want to do. There's a way to do this properly, and then there's a way to give off an entire chapter of Lord of the Rings and have everyone in the room fall asleep. So we don't want that. The way that I found to do this is basically just a simple 2-sentence structure. Number 1, say what happens. Noun, verb, object. A goblin hits the knight. That's it. Essential information. Everyone must know this clearly and in the rules of the book. If something has rules definitions to it, that has to go into your first sentence. You open with that. Hey everyone, this just happened. This has this rules implication for whoever character is. The second sentence, which is also just as important, is to lead the story. It's to then instruct your actors. Don't just tell them what happened. Say, hey, priest, you now hear grunts of pain coming from the night. What will you do next? You need to pick someone, address them, and ask a question. Again, a lot of people maybe feel shy, maybe feel social anxiety. I am sorry, you are meant to address people and get the conversation flowing with everyone else in the group. You need to get the attention of your players and allow them to let the story flow from there. Most systems have an initiative system that really helps with this. You just pick whoever's the next person in the initiative. If you don't have that for whatever reason, you can stack the deck a little bit and just be like, hey, I really think the healer should go next because I almost murdered someone. That's probably important. But if they want to do their own thing, let them do their own thing, as long as they're moving the story. Now, D&D horror stories is a real subreddit that can be very funny or very traumatizing. None of us in this room are immune from being on the internet. I was like, wow, this DM was awful, or wow, these players were awful, and no one did anything about it. Conflict happens. Bad things happen. This is real life we're talking about this. This is real people. I'm not saying this to scare anyone. This is in fact the opposite. I find this is not talked about enough. Things happen and you can do something about them. You can resolve conflict. This is how you will do that. You need to separate whoever's in the party that's having a bad time, that's starting to get a little, type of way, separate them. Physically, whether it's digitally, you get them in different chat rooms or whatever you need to do, they need to be brought apart instantly. Because that tension, that chaos is only going to grow the longer they're in contact. Once that's done, and you're sure that they cannot interact with each other to continue the fight, you need to address each person privately, get their side of the story, and more importantly, hear out their feelings. They're probably mad for a reason, even if it's not a very good reason, as I found kind of happens a lot. Sometimes people just have bad days, and that's okay. Bad days happen. People, your players, they want to feel heard. They want to feel like their choices matter. So, hear them out, and more importantly, try to find common ground when you have multiple players kind of conflicting with each other in this way. Once you do that, then you say, okay, you just want to have a good time, they just want to have a good time, or they want to win this fight, you want to win this fight. All right, let's bring everybody back together and agree, hey, this is what everybody wants, and this is how we can get that. Maybe people just needed a moment to air things out. People have bad days, it's okay, it happens, let the stress, hey, I'm sorry, we're coming back together, it's all good. Maybe it was a genuine argument like, no, we need to do this, no, we need to do that. Hey, maybe we can try this person's idea first because it's less risky, and if that doesn't work, we'll go over to the other side, right? This is that sort of conflict negotiation that is something you should learn as a dungeon master before going in. If you're going to interact with a lot of people, you need to learn how to make a lot of people happy. And people are notoriously kind of unhappy. But, continuing from there. So that's the nasty part. Okay, continuing that for just a little bit more. At the end of everything, let's say you have everyone together and agreeing. What do you agree on and how? Well, there's 3 ways to do it. You can let the dice decide. Usually you do this if maybe people don't trust you. For example, if you're a random dungeon master at a convention and none of you know me listening here in this crowd. Or you can also say, hey, you all chose me to be the dungeon master, or you all opted into this, I'm going to be the leader, and what I'm going to say goes, and you're going to assert your authority for whatever that decision happens to be. Or finally, you can say, hey, I know this is bad, but we're in a really important spot in the story, and I don't want to lose that momentum. I will hear and address your concerns. We will get to this in post after the session. We don't have to fix everything in the 3 hours that we're here. We have entire weeks potentially in between sessions. We can maybe figure it out over that time with clear heads, with more information, with less immediately on the line. Whatever works best for your group. And of course, if people are in conflict, please take a break. And this includes also, sometimes you can be in conflict by yourself. Oh wow, the players just shot the world leader in the head? I don't know how to render that. Oh my god, I need a break. Let me go to my notes real quick. Break in case of nuclear war. Yes, now I know what to do. It's okay to take a break from your own players, even in the middle of a session. Again, I think too many people don't do this. People are like, oh, but if I walk away, people think I'm going to be like lame or something. No, they won't. They don't care. In fact, I find that many of my players love and adore when they put me into a bind and I have to step out of the room, because they know that in that moment, yeah, they won. So let them have that. It's okay. It's more important that you don't get in over your own head and that you can take things at a nice, even pace. Don't stress yourself out if you don't have to. It's okay to take a break. Just like you can summon everyone and say, hey, we are playing D&D right here, right now, you can equally say, we're not playing D&D, I'm stressed out. That's okay too. You have both authorities. Now, let's get into those 3 pillars and into the meat of this presentation. The narrative, that point 0 we talked about. As the Dungeon Master, it is your job to world build. For some of you, this is the entire love of it. Or for some people, I just see them only building worlds and never actually running games. Please let me run my characters. So, generally speaking, a setting for a role-playing game should naturally give goals to the players. And you have 4 main tools to do this with. You have factions, which are groups of people trying to do something. It could be anything. Whether it's the scholarly nerds who just want to learn more about the world, or perhaps the holy knights that are trying to protect it from incursions from beyond. You also have regions, which will be like physical places or cultures and norms that typically arise from historical context. This is those deep wars in history like you would see in Lord of the Rings and things like that. Excuse me. You also have my personal favorite, the apocalypse, which doesn't literally have to be the end of the world. Those stories are a little bit played out, let's be honest here. But it's just a major event that will soon or already has occurred. Something that's going to change the status quo of this world. It could be something, yes, as dramatic as the end of all things forever and forevermore, until we get bored and move on to the next campaign. Or it could also just be, hey, there's an election coming up. The leader of this country is going to change soon. There will be a new regime, even if it's completely peaceful. There are some people who want that to happen, and there's some people that maybe they don't. And there's your plot right there. And finally, the individual characters, your personal OCs, your comfort characters and stuff like that. Those people who will just be in the world and may influence or shape it to your whims. Like say, hey, this is the big bad evil guy, and everything else, we'll figure it out along the way. So going from that, let's dive deeper into factions. The goal, right? Every faction should have a goal. Why or what are they organizing for? They shouldn't directly conflict with other factions. For example, a tyrant's desire for order versus the quality of life for the rebels. The reason I say this is because if you have 2 factions that one cannot exist without the other, or vice versa, like, oh yeah, my existence hinges on your defeat, well, you're going to start running out of a lot of content really quickly. I'm trying to keep you all out of the drawing board as much as possible because you want to run and play games with your friends, not be completely stuck in writer's limbo forever. Or, I mean, maybe some of you really like that. But generally speaking, you want factions that kind of could theoretically work together even under interesting circumstances. Like when the School of Knowledge accidentally opens up a portal to hell and they have to call the Knights to bust them out of it for the 50th time. You know, the Knights will probably have a lot easier time if the mages didn't exist anymore, but that's a plot for another day. Finally, who are the faces of these factions? Who will your players actually speak with to someone who has some level of authority who may understand what's going on here? Do not put the highest person in any faction in front of your players, because the second they don't like them, their life expectancy turns to 0. It's something that I have learned. So try to make the face of your faction replaceable. Make it someone who's more of a middle manager that's like, yeah, here's some random people who are maybe kind of important to us, and go wrangle them. That's going to be your job, Steve, Carl, Mary, whatever. And, maybe they have to be replaced every so often by mysterious circumstances. Think about the kind of person who would want the job of a middle manager type person in these factions, because that character, that idea of that person is going to be who you end up playing a lot, whether or not they survive their current assignment. Because again, you throw the next one in there, and there will be some things that hold the story together. And finally, the method. How do they actually go about in this world? How do they get the things that they want? Where do they keep finding minions? These will be surprisingly important questions as your players begin to mull through all of them. Regions! We get to now the physical locations of the world. Generally, I like to think of regions as a place that has a mechanic tied to it. What do the players deal with here? Is it physical hazards like dense fog or dangerous monsters around every corner? Or is it more social-oriented things like dangerous politics and local cults that may seek out these people and, rearrange their organs into a more satisfactory way?
Why is it like this is also very important. Is it the world like this because of the factions, that they're doing something here? Is it an apocalyptic event that has irrevocably changed this land? Or maybe did one local witch just really get pissed off and said, all of you are cursed? So, whatever works for your story. But the important part is that places in all of these other ideas, all of these parts of the world should connect and tie together. Not ridiculously, incredibly so, just one thing here and there. Wow, this place is really messed up because this knight decided to unleash Ultima in this local area. Why, what did the Knights faction think about that? And you can kind of play this Wikipedia game, going from one part of your world all the way out, ending up somewhere else. If you can do that, you're probably on the right track, because then your players can also do the same thing and maybe try to think out and about your world a little bit more. Where can your players find the answers to questions of why the world is the way that it is? Now, the apocalypse, our favorite part of Dungeons & Dragons, isn't it? Well, we have to think about what's going to change. Is it the end of the nation, the end of everything, a new regime, or perhaps even just a new era of understanding, going from high magics to science, for example? Think about who is the most nervous and who is the most at risk from these changes. Is it specific factions, certain people, maybe the players themselves? Who has the most to lose if nothing is done by the end of your story? That's probably going to be your main antagonist, naturally speaking. And also, how soon is it? Is it going to be in years? Who cares? Is it in months? Maybe minutes. Maybe it's already happened and now we're just dealing with the fallout of that. As things change from anxiety to acceptance in a new world order, there's all kinds of plots. The apocalypse is not always in the future. And finally, people. Where are they from? Are they probably from one of the worlds and countries and regions that you've made? What do they want? Is it involving the apocalypse? Do they want to find someone else, engage a faction, or just be somewhere where the plot isn't happening, maybe? A lot safer that way. And how can they get that? Again, through the factions, someone they know? Do they have apocalyptic power themselves? Or do they want to use the region to their advantage? Maybe there's a special thing about this mechanic. Maybe there's a reason there's always this mysterious fog that takes people away. Who knows? And of course, what do they like? I generally find that 6 to 9 attributes for a character is enough to draw them out, but you don't have to go that deep. Generally, there's 3 layers. There's the immediate visual of what someone looks like, their ancestry, their gender, maybe a few unusual traits about them that can leave them in the mind of your players. You can stop here if it's just someone off the street that the players wanted to talk to. But then there's also community. What's their job? How does that change what they look like? Do they wear a particular tabard, or maybe their hands are scarred from woodworking, or something like that? Because what we do all day tends to have an effect on us. For example, I'm pale as a horse because I'm always inside programming. But, other jobs can have other changes on physiology. And of course, what's their hobby? Where can the players find them? What are they doing in their spare time? What do they enjoy about the world? I find it's good to go to the second level when it's a character that's maybe a little more important in an arc, or someone that the players are going to meet over and over and over and over again, because I will insist on using only one shopkeeper. That's all you get. And then finally, we have the internals. We can go through all 3 layers for someone that's actually important. This is your antagonist, your major players in the world, characters that your players will come back to over and over and over again, or at the very least, they'll probably want to know everything about before they have to decapitate them. These will be their virtue and vice, the things that drive them. Why do they want the things that they want? What is their tragic backstory, or lack thereof? So these are all things to think about when making individual characters. And of course, why should your players care about all of this hard work that you're putting into this world and your campaign and sessions and so on and so forth? Well, they'll probably want to care if they at least tie into one of the 4 things I've mentioned here: region, faction, people, the apocalypse. If they have something to do with that as part of their own story, their own character, if they think, wow, that's cool, I want to be a part of that, do it. Give it to them, is really where I'm going to twist the knife here. Because a lot of people, we love writing our novels, we love writing our worlds, but we can't forget that there's 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I don't know how big your groups are, I know mine have gotten huge. There's lots of other people in these rooms with us playing these games. Give them a stake in your world, be comfortable with saying, this is my baby darling that I crafted myself. Here you go. If you want the Knights faction to be a bunch of crazy crusader mad drunkards, go for it. If that's what it takes to make it yours, for you to give a dang about these people and places and what's going on, feel free to make the player a source of authority once you are done with your initial craft from the point zero. The agreement, of course, is I made this with this specific idea in mind. Hold that true. Everything else, if I didn't say it, why shouldn't it exist? Go ahead, make it your own. And that also, this gives you a way to call upon your players much more naturally. If you mention, oh hey, yeah, something about the country of Paradisia, speaking of which, would you like to say something about that country? Or perhaps if I mention the lost queen of Azrael, well wait a minute, aren't you the lost princess of that royalty? Maybe you might have something important here to mention. So none of these things have to be the point of the story. Again, you're giving this to the players, you should expect them to completely twist and brutalize it in the worst ways possible, but it's theirs, and hopefully you didn't hinge your entire plot on that one thing. If your entire plot hinges on one thing, don't give that to your players. Be a little smarter than that. And of course, we have story arcs. How should you actually craft your campaign from beginning to end? This is a simple thing we can do here. Again, the basics flow any story. Introduction. What's going on? Why do we care about that? Now, the rising tension as we define risks and give new information to the players to maybe, flesh things out a little bit in the story. You don't want to lore dump them in the first session or session 0. You want that to come naturally over time as they ask questions about their own backstories and what they're related to, and as well as just, the characters that they meet along the way. Hey, why does this group of people really want us dead every time we meet them? I've been wondering that for the past 300 days. Don't worry about it. And of course, in your epilogue, you want to tie up loose ends and decide where to go from there. This story arc will continue from your first session, from your first little story arc, all the way through until finally you have nowhere else to go and need to end the world or something like that. Right? Allow players to introduce themselves, which that being a major point in the story, and of course the tension of everything. You need to determine the obstacles that prevent them from getting what they want right away. As I heard someone say, it is the player's job to climb up a tree and your job to throw rocks at them. This is the fun of D&D. How they deal with it is their choice, however, so you must honor your players' decisions. You may set up the scenario however it is, but it is their right to say how they get out of it, whether it's through a rules break that you weren't expecting, or in a body bag, whatever works for the group. And finally, a climax. The players are about to achieve what they want, but you need to determine what the risk is in finally getting their dreams. What is the risk in trying? Whether they succeed, whether they fail, or maybe it was a monkey's paw the entire time. And finally, in the epilogue, or whenever a player is leaving the session, as it were, let the players define what they want. If everything's going to end anyway, let them go out with a bang, because they'll remember that a lot more. So, and of course, you can use that to establish sequels. Now, roleplay. This is how we become many different people at once, because fact of the matter is, not all of us are voice actors, or even just much of actors in general, but generally a lot of people find it very overwhelming to keep track of 100 different people and to convey that meaningfully to the players. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, why are we even bothering with roleplay in the first place? Aren't these number games with math dice and equations and everything? Why don't we just kill everything? No, there's reasons for roleplay. It is an action unto itself. You can gather information. You can convince people to take or stop actions. Why go through a combat if you can just ask nicely? Some people just want a little bit of respect, dang it. You can also establish advantage for the players, like getting the aid of a mighty faction before going into battle. Or perhaps it could just be a moment of levity, letting people warm up or cool down with their characters. I'm a huge fan of opening every session with a little bit of lighthearted roleplay, and likewise letting it come down. Even if they're in the middle of battle, I can just say, what is everyone's going through right now? Like, what is the exact, what's coming out of your mouths? How are you feeling? And then we'll pick up from that in the next section. Talking is important. It's not just the numbers, and it can loop into the numbers as well. We can also have roleplay encounters, full-on things with stakes and limits that will burn through players' resources like nothing else. So they can be non-violent, but still treat roleplay as a proper encounter to be solved, specifically focusing on the motive. What do the people involved in this encounter want? Even if it's something as simple as like, hey, we have this giant wall and the players need to get through it somehow. Well, why is it there? Is there anyone that can talk to them or speak about the history of this obstacle? What is the obstacle exactly? Or more specifically, if it's a conversation, what do people think that they need to do? And how does that contract with the reality of what's actually in front of them? It's because people may have culture, they may have the meddling of someone else in their head, getting them to think a certain way. If they think like, oh no, adventurers can never be trusted, my mom always told me so. Well, maybe you can prove that their mom was lying to them, perhaps. You don't have to fight your way through all the guards. Maybe you just need to give them, existential life crisis. That works too. And also, we can continue from there. But we need to establish what the stakes are. Are we just haggling to not lose a little bit of gold? Are we holding on to a useful relationship where someone's like, wait a minute, why am I traveling with a bunch of people who seem to nearly die every week? Maybe you need to convince someone to stick around. Or maybe you're trying to prevent a doom situation where your players are actually losing, and the last thing to say is maybe, hey, beg God for help. And now you're in an Ace Attorney thing with your local god. And of course, what's the approach that the players want? Are they going to lie, intimidate, appeal to reason, appeal to emotion? Is the bard seducing the dragon yet again for the 30th time? But there's many ways to engage in combat, and there's many ways to try and talk to someone. They should be considered for a lot of your sessions, and as a way to deepen everything else. Now, how do we actually be someone else? How do we be the person on the other side of this room? Well, you can use your words to differentiate yourself, or blacken it out is what I just expressed. So a brute will hurt someone, but a noble will devastate you and make you wish you were never born. The amount of language that you use, what kinds of words you use, can say a lot about a person, whether it's their education level or perhaps their background, the things that they know. And of course, you can also have tics, describe what an NPC always does. For example, the accuser will always point at you because I know that you were guilty, while the victim will be holding themselves tight because they don't want anything else bad to happen. You can put accents on certain words and specific phrases, or just repeat things, because when you repeat things a lot, it really gets in your head, and when you repeat things, you can really remember that this NPC repeats things. Do you get it yet? So without changing your voice at all, just the words that you use can do a lot to say about the NPCs. But of course, just because the advice is always, oh, no, I want to be like the people on those podcasts. I need to do the funny voices because they really are fun, I'll tell you that. But I don't know how to do them. I've spoken with a lot of DMs who just seem to always be monotone, whether because they just don't care, which is perfectly fine, or perhaps they didn't know what to do. I'll teach you how to do that now, because learning how to voice act is really hard, and constantly I see people like, oh, imagine a ball inside. The advice makes sense if you're really going into it and paying for coaches and stuff like that. I find that physical approaches are much better. So let's say you want to speak more masculine, more like a man. Well, the way that you would do that is you want to exaggerate your mouth motions and the words that you say as much as possible. The reason that this brings down the tone of my voice is because of the fact that with the larger that my lips grow, the sound waves are allowed to be more longer, more drawn out, that lower tone that you're associated with masculinity. And of course, there's also the underbite, where if I speak like this, can anyone really understand what I'm saying? Not too much, right? But then if I actually speak in the lower voice, it becomes just a little bit more clear. If you can have a level of clarity while speaking through an underbite, then you can combine them together and come out as a stronger, more masculine man than ever before, where my lips are still more exaggerated and I'm using the correct tone of reaching over past that underbite. However you imagine it is for you. Again, I actually do use the ball method to imagine where my voice is, and I use that to express myself. But everyone else, your muscles, the way that you use your body, might be different from me. But if you can make this work, then you can make this work. So that's the training that I give you all. And for women, if you want to have a more feminine voice, well, usually you want to actually do the opposite. Make your lips a little bit smaller and kind of have a more puckered look to them. Think about like speaking as the seductress, as it were. Always be kissing as it was with your voice. And of course, you can do the opposite with the overbite. Again, this sounds absolutely ridiculous if I'm just using a normal voice. But if I begin speaking at the appropriate place, with the appropriate muscles, it comes out just a little bit better. And then my voice is up here, just like this. And I can speak as a lot of different women with that, and I've made a lot of men feel very special about themselves. Which has always been weird at public tables, but hey, I'll take what I can get. So, and finally, if you want to speak like an old man, you just gotta really use your voice and exhale a lot. Oh God, I'm always out of breath and constantly talking. But then I can combine more of the voices and be like an old grandma. Have fun. Play around, and if you want to go into one gender or the other, these will generally be the most basic advices that I can possibly give you. They're not going to fully help you transition your voice, as it were, or anything like that, but I find it's a good starting place before you start dropping money on coaches and surgeries and all that other jazz. You'll be surprised at how much room your own human body will give you in acting. Now, once again, why do we care about roleplay? Why will your players care about this? Well, some of the characters might be useful. They could be merchants. They could be the hired help in a combat. They can be the leaders of factions that can otherwise block them from what they want. Maybe they're tied to a player. Once again, maybe they just really like this one character. Like, oh, hey, I want to have, a child daughter. I want to have a pet. I want to have, a cool relation to someone. Like, oh, I want to have this estranged brother who's in the Knights, right? Something like that. This gives a way for people to care. And of course, there's levity. You can make certain NPCs safe or make them funny and beloved to the party. Like, for example, one secret thing that I've always had is that Paul Walker, the actor, is always in every single one of my campaigns if the players find him. And the rule is he is always helpful and he is always a safe haven, even in the most brutal and drudgy, political conspiracies ever. Especially in those games, they know we need to find Paul Walker because he's the only man who will tell us the truth. And just having that existence, knowing that someone has that trait, will make them a North Star for your players if you set it up correctly. Or, of course, you can just have it be dangerous, whether they're bosses, the enemy that seems to always get away or has taken something from the players. Now, the math, encounters. Notice I'm not saying combat because there's more to that, and there's more to what makes something difficult than just bloodshed and murder. This can apply to any sort of thing where I want what you have, or I want something and you don't want me to have it. That is an encounter, and this is in every game system. What is it exactly? You have opposing groups, the players versus something. It could be an enemy. What does the enemy want? How do these two groups try to rectify their differences? Is one side going to just try to steal from them in a certain amount of time? Is another side trying to sneak on by without getting detected? Or maybe they just really hate each other and we're in the middle of the arena and it's go time, baby! What are the stakes if the players fail? And this is where I'm going to have a very controversial rule because this is a 101 panel and I'm going to treat it accordingly. My rule to all of us prospecting DMs here, or even DMs who've done this for a long time, try this out. You can't kill anyone. No blood is allowed to ever fall in your games. And I'm not saying this like, murder's bad, and I have an oath that says we can't do that. Oh no, we're just playing Brindlewood. It's just a little cute game about grandmas trying to find Cthulhu. No, I'm not saying it for any kind of reason or to put down, hey, if you guys like Berserk or some other dark fiction or anything, that's fine. The reason I don't want you killing anyone is because it is wasting your own time. If you went out of your way to make an encounter, to set up a region, to make these characters, and they are dead within 5 minutes, if it took you more than 5 minutes to make that character, you have wasted time. More importantly than that, they can still be useful in a lot of other ways. If an enemy escapes the capture of the players, they can communicate with the other factions who may do more interesting things with them later on. Hey, if we can't beat the players, maybe we can join them, join forces, start up a new plot line. Maybe the enemies trade sides. Maybe the enemies give up their ways and become a helpful NPC later down the line. A merchant who's really terrified because they know they will be robbed at a moment's notice. There's just so many more ways to go about these stories, but you can't explore them if you keep taking your own pieces off the table. Keep them around for as long as possible, and only take a piece off when they literally cannot possibly serve any other purpose. Or this campaign's about the end anyway, rocks fall, everyone dies. Right? Again, maybe they can trade resources, maybe the opponents might get something that the players don't want, you can set them back in a timeline, so on and so forth. And also, for your encounters, establish what is the win and fail condition for both parties. At what point do you draw the line and say, this is over? Is it when everyone's dead? Okay, kind of extreme, but sure. Is it when the ring is in someone's hand because then they're just going to use the magic and nothing matters anymore? That's fine too. Or is it just a certain amount of time where it's no, we just need to get the enemy army through this gate, and that's all that matters, because once that happens, all bets are off. Think about other things that are not just life or death, because often they'll be far more interesting. Now let's get into that mathematics. How do we balance things? Well, luckily for us, I don't care what system you're running, because unfortunately all of us are victims of physics. Space and time affect everyone in every game just about equally. No matter what you're playing, no matter what dice you're using, if you're using dice at all. So I might be over here, you might be over there, and the thing that we need to get to is over there, and it could take 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds, or more realistically, I only have 3 hours in this room with you guys, so we need to finish this session up faster than not. So the way that I like to imagine this is that in real life, generally, any given system, any given encounter you have, it'll take about 1 hour to resolve one total pass around the table for everyone there. That's assuming people are talking, that's assuming people have rules questions, it's assuming people didn't think about what they were doing on their turn until they got there. So all kinds of things, 1 hour is generally a rough mark. You should balance your encounters around that fact. Now, how many rounds should you have? If it's a simple encounter, 1 to 3 is fine. If it's a medium, which is what most people are going to be doing, that's 4 to 6. You could plan roughly your whole session around that. And finally, for something climactic, the end of the campaign, where your players are putting everything on the line, that could be 6 or beyond. I normally don't recommend it, but it is something you can do. And the players win if they can accomplish their goal, give or take that many rounds, right? 1 or 2 maybe. And if they didn't, they fail. I don't care if nearly every goblin is dead. You didn't save the person in time, bam, they're gone. Yeah, no, I just said no murder. So, bam, the last goblin jumps forward, kidnaps them, and now you're in a whole new plot line. You want to balance things around time more so than hit points or resources, because those two things can change all the time and in very unexpected ways. Try balancing 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I've given up. You don't need to suffer that much. It's much easier to balance around time. It is a far more useful skill. And again, don't be afraid from letting your players fail. If everything is not about living or dying, well then suddenly you can have a lot of penalties for your players that don't actually feel debilitating. You can punish them in terms of story, not in terms of character sheet. Now, more math. How do we actually do this? You want to find what is the average value of the players on their rolls. This depends on the game or the system you are playing. If it's Dungeons & Dragons, you expect them to have an 11 on a regular D20. If you're playing something like Mothership, oh my god, the 50-50 is the strongest person in the universe. It's ridiculous. They're expected to fail all the time. You need to expect, okay, every round, how many times are my players expected to succeed? If you can calculate that, you're almost done. Then you want to see how many successes you want the players to have by the end of your time frame. If they need to pass 3 times, 4 times, whatever, you can then begin to measure this around time. It's like, oh, if they get 3 successes per round, okay, a 3-round encounter should be about 9 successes before you say, okay, you did it, we're done. And of course, you can tweak the numbers to however you like. If you're playing something gritty to the wall that's hard, well, make it say, hey, you guys need to pass more often than not. You need 66% success rate. If you want it to be a little bit easier because, hey, we're going to take it, nicer, all right, then 33%. You can have a couple fails here or there, and it really doesn't change anything. So on and so forth. Again, using Dungeons & Dragons as a baseline, it assumes that 50-50 is the standard for a medium encounter. This is a lie. Their math is terrible. But I did do the math, and I understood this is what they were trying to go for, and then they kept buffing wizards for 5 books in a row. Anyway, understand that you will get the math wrong. Once again, I don't want you to memorize rules. I don't need you to start doing calculus for your games. But just have a rough idea of what you're trying to do, so if things go wrong, you can actually begin to correct yourself. Were they faster than you expected? Oh, okay, then it needs to be harder by about this much. Oh, they were actually a lot slower and I nearly murdered everyone by mistake. Okay, I need to make it easier by about this much. I have the math and the numbers to do it. I always get dungeon masters that, again, I have properly trained people. I have taught more explicitly this sort of thing. And this is always what people get really frustrated with and where they want to quit and throw up their dice. They say, everything went terrible and I don't know why. If you do the math, you have a north guiding star on why things are going wrong and you can begin to fix it from there, right? And also, if things are going wrong, you can just lie. Right? If your players aren't always seeing, they don't even if your dice are fully open, you can just say, oh wow, all my goblins are already dead, it's only the first turn, here's reinforcements. Here's more reinforcements. Alright, if I want to hit 3 rounds, I'm God, and I'm going to make 3 rounds one way or another. You don't have to play honorably when the other side doesn't even know what you're doing. They don't even know what the rules are. You know the rules, and you can bend them whenever you want. Be honorable about it, of course, in the sense that, like, don't just torture people for no reason. If the encounter is quick and they didn't care about it anyway, let it end fast. If people aren't having a good time, just move on to the next thing. If people are really loving this one encounter, just add a couple enemies. Like, if they're having a great time, just let them keep going, right? I've had so many sessions where I just let the players talk themselves to death and they all had fun and I did literally nothing but sit there. It's great, right? Fun is what you need to maximize, not time, not this, not that. But space-time is a very important thing to learn as a dungeon master. And of course, you can have more fun encounters. It doesn't always have to be just like a binary thing. Did we do the thing or not? Did I hit you enough times to bring you down to 0? Or maybe I needed to talk to someone. Someone needed to handle a MacGuffin. We needed to steal something in the middle of this other thing going on. Right? Generally, you want to have 2 objectives in any encounter you do, because not everyone is going to be a murder fiend, and not everyone is going to be the crazy big role player. If everyone has something unique to do that is their job that they think will be cool, then that's going to be a good encounter. Now again, don't overload yourself. Don't make a healing check, and a fighting check, and a talking check, and a theft check. Don't do one for every player. That's a little bit too much. But generally speaking, most games allow players to specialize in multiple things. Not all of them, but every character sheet has at least 2 aspects to it. So as long as you're covering 2 aspects of the game in all of your encounters, everyone should have something to do that's like, yeah, I did it. And they're having fun. The more things people are doing, the more fun that they're having. Dungeons are encounters laid out to evoke emotion. This is my crack-headed new idea of what dungeons are. This is for a later panel, but for the point of this one, I want to show all of you John 4's 5-room dungeon. If you've heard of it already, you don't need to explain too more, except I will anyway, because I think there's something very unique about this dungeon that no one talks about. John 4's 5-room dungeon is literally just that. You have 5 rooms in the dungeon, the players have to go through them, and they are ranked in order of the introduction, the setback, puzzle, climax, reward. Let's ignore reward for now. We all know what that one is. It's very simple. An introduction. You want to introduce a concept to your players. That concept can be anything. It could be a literal game mechanic, like fire is hot, or it could be something more unique, like, hey, this is the lore of this land. The first person you meet is going to introduce themselves by a title, by a certain phrase, and the players have to begin to say, hey, what's that about? Then you go into the setback, which is going to be either a combat encounter of some kind, or it could be more like a skill check of some sort. The idea here is that whatever you did in the previous room, you need to undo it in the second. Not because, oh wow, I made a mistake. No, but because, like, let's say, hey, fire is bad. All right, the first, I walk up to this dungeon and I get shot in the face by a guard, the arrow's on fire, ow, fire hurts. But then in the second room, I have to make a skill check of some kind. Hey, there's these fire jets on the ground that have rocks on top of them, and if you get on them, woo! Okay, fire's not always bad. Fire can let you move around in places. Then you get to the third room, you combine both of them together. Now you're trying to avoid fiery arrows while also using the fire to move around, and finally you have the climax where you begin to allow the players to use this against the boss. If I am describing a video game like Legend of Zelda, you would be correct. The idea with dungeons is that you want the players to feel something by the end of it, depending on what that feeling is. I find that John 4's room design is perfect for allowing players to feel mastery of a topic. By the time they enter, they will know nothing. By the time they leave, they will have mastered it and will have their own little ball of fire in their hands as the reward for the dungeon. 3 pillars in a concept is a very good baseline. You want to test your players in 3 different dimensions of whatever you're giving them. Now, let's get to the end here for things that are not Dungeons & Dragons. Let's pick a system. Starting out with one-page games. You can literally, most of these are completely free and super easy to get into on the internet. And again, like, you can teach them in literally 2 seconds or less to anybody. However, there's often no depth to these games. There's not really too much to, like, fine-tune your character in a way that you want, and it's hard to stick around with them because of that. Once you've played Lasers and Feelings once or twice, you've played it a million times. And there's often no support for these games. But some good examples here are Lasers and Feelings for a sci-fi kick. There's Briarwood for an old-school fantasy feeling, if you want to get something more like old-school Renaissance-style D&D. And there's Go Not Gentle, which is a horror version of the same concepts. Then we have rules light to medium. This is, I would say, a sweet spot of depth. They're pretty much easy to play, and they're pretty well priced. Most of these games go for about maybe 10, 20 bucks at most for like everything that they have. But again, you may have to hack in the missing pieces of the game. If something is more focused about combat or roleplay, you're probably going to have to like ad-lib the second part if it gets to that in your games. And once again, small communities mean small support. If you have a problem with the game, you're kind of on your own. Shadow Dark is an old school take on 5th edition. It has like a lot of the same 5e rules, but plays more like the OSR classics, and it's a much smaller book. However, the reason I bring it up is because it counts as an OSR game in full, and a lot of material that's in that community is meant to be cross-transferable with everyone else. So it has a lot more support than you would think it has if you're willing to just look slightly left of whatever the other systems are doing. Then there's Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green. These are horror games that where you're just playing as normal people and just rolling simple skill checks and trying not to go insane. Simpler games, they are very well supported, lots of books, lots of communities run with them. So again, if that sounds like it's up your alley, go for it. There's Legend in the Mist, which I just finally got my copy recently. It's a generic fantasy thing. It's meant to be rustic fantasy like Lord of the Rings. It plays very similarly to Fate, but I find a lot simpler. Your character is like 12 words, and you use that for all of your rolls. If a word applies, that's a bonus to your roll. You go up, you go down, and that's pretty much the gist of the system. I just taught all of you how to play Legend in the Mist. And finally, there's Light Vegan Edition, which someone said, wow, Destiny is dying. I'm going to turn it into a D&D role-playing game. It is completely free now that they've announced that Destiny 2, and that it will no longer be supported. That's currently where I'm fixated on. So, yeah. Crunchy games. These games have a lot of depth where you can make tons of characters and stories with all the little fiddly bits that you exactly need. However, they will have a learning curve. These books can get very big, very fast, and very expensive. At least $60 a pop we're talking about now. So we have Dungeons & Dragons, the classic pick. There's also World of Darkness, which is modern fantasy, and I would say is probably the #2 game system in the world, with all the different ways that you can play the game. It has very deep lore, which is somewhat essential for playing. There's Lancer, which is Gundams and Mecha. I actually genuinely recommend Lancer if you want to learn more about how to be a better dungeon master. The DMG for Lancer is really good. It goes through a lot of ideas on how to make encounters, how you would do them, why you would make certain enemies in certain ways, and I found it very helpful for that. And finally, we have Edge of Empire, my personal favorite. It uses like role-play improv dice. You have hieroglyphic dice that you have to read and interpret. It's really weird. I love it. I'm weird. And finally, we have The Weird. We have Unbound, which is a 52-card deck Western theme game, where your deck is you. You literally draw on your deck of cards whenever you crit one way or another. So eventually, by the end of the campaign, you will have a broken leg, the love of your life, and a whole bunch of other trauma that's slowly keeping you down. But at the end of it all, you have your own personal deck. Then there's also Dread, which is Jenga as a resolution system. Don't let the tower fall, by God, and you will learn fear in a very physical way. There's also Godsend for people who don't like math at all. If you just want to roleplay with like a little bit more rules, then you want Godsend, where the numbers in the game is just how many sentences you're allowed to have before you need to shut up. So if you have 5 in strength, you can go absolutely buck wild crazy in a random fight. But the second someone says, yeah, what's 2 + 2? Idiot. And so that's how Godsend works. And then finally, we have Tokyo Nova, which uses the entire full Tarot Arcana and uses it as all the witches intended. Blackjack and Witches, it is only a fan-translated game from Japan because the Japanese don't like us. So be mindful of that. Finally, there's some tools on screen, a bunch of different maps that I personally love, and I find these games to have really good Dungeon Master support. This is Lancer, Mothership, Electric Bastion Land, and of course, The Legend of the Lazy GM, if you want more reading on any of these topics. Now, everyone has their phones out. I'm sorry to say, keep them out, because there's a QR code, because CtCon has a Discord with all my slides on it, so you don't have to like constantly take photos on your phones or anything. So I want to say thank each and every one of you for coming here today. It's been a pleasure to do this panel, and I'm sure I have plenty of time left over. I don't have plenty of time left over. I use all my time again. Well, you know what? We're just going to stick with that as it is because I'm sure people have lots of questions. So let's get to that. Whew. Any questions? Over here. Or well, I'll speak out so I can hear you.
So I didn't get I received a PS2.
Okay, that's my turn.
And I've been having trouble with my recording.
How's that?
I tend to lay out the encounter. I describe it as one as a GM would, and a lot of it falls on dead figures.
Okay.
And I have to constantly repeat myself. And it's not like that they're not engaged, but they choose to be engaged or they want to. So I have difficulties bringing them in.
How do we hold attention? So again, that's going to be like, people should have their characters tie into the encounter in some way somehow, where they're tracking something else there. For example, if one of the enemies is the player's long lost nemesis, well, every time that enemy activates, they will also probably naturally pay attention. This is also where I want to say, well, like, the less you speak, the more they're going to be speaking, and you're forcing them to be engaged. And that's where I lead into with like that leading question where it's like, hey, I'm answering what happened to you. Hey, you took a hit. You're taking damage, blah, 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 blah. Hey, next person, do you have anything to say about that? And naturally, when you address them directly, immediately they're going to be paying attention. Thank you for coming. So try to use the speech methods that I mentioned here, and again, make sure that they always have something personal to the characters in these encounters that should tie them in a little bit more. I remember one time at the con here, I literally was tapping someone's shoulder to let them know that, hey, your turn is next. Because it was forever on their phone. Hey, it worked. Didn't bother me, and everyone had a good time. Yes?
I've run into issues in like a larger campaign, like one-shots or larger campaigns, where you end up in a town, and then the party splits up, goes their own way. How do you manage your time in between each player?
Oh, I love those. I love splitting up the party, but all the sins that GMs can make you do them, well, that's a different panel. So, splitting up the party, what you want to do is, once again, kind of calling back to that narrative trick here, where it's like you need to give players ownership of other things there. Yes, you can split the party and allow them to like have their own scenes, but the idea is that everyone should still be playing. Everyone should still be in every scene. It's just that their characters aren't in that scene. So, for example, the party splits up. We're going to go shopping. You guys are going to go investigating. Cool. Turn the other players into the shopkeepers and give them a prompt. Be like, hey, be as annoying as humanly possible. Right? Even if you spend the entire session in that shop, everyone's probably going to have a surprisingly good time. My favorite boss enemies are my own players when someone decides to get up in their britches and go on the other side of the world. It's worked every single time, and it's really, well, unfortunately my party doesn't split up anymore once they started doing that. But hey, it was fun when it lasted. No question over here.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier on in the presentation, like different ways to sort of resolve things that happen, right?
Yes.
Dice, so you can make your own call. Me as a DM, I personally really like to turn things back from the mechanics of the dice to player sheets as much as possible.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for maybe...
D&D 101, but we're about to go into another panel. I don't know what the next panel is.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations for maybe for like a good system where like I run into problems often where it's like the system doesn't have support for whatever niche situation we've ended up in, so I have to make something up. I like avoiding that as much as possible. Do you have any recommendations for good systems that maybe can help with that, or otherwise like good ways to sort of build your own little mechanics for handling stuff like that?
Sure. So real edge cases, how do you solve that? And like how would you make systems to handle that on a more regular basis? It's not like a one-time call, but maybe something that keeps happening, right? And it's not otherwise handled in the system. One that I always fall back on is I just let players say, hey, odds or evens, right? If I don't know and I say, hey, it's about 50-50 chance, right? I just have my players roll that and I make them bet. Say, hey, odds or evens, let's go right now. I specifically put them involved because then they're paying attention, they feel like they won or lost against me. I have no idea how the dice are going to come out. But more specifically than that, I find that usually you want things to tie into players' skills, however best possible, and allow them to just like, if you can try to connect back to the skill system in some way, that's usually the best option. Other than that, you can probably say, hey, maybe some universal things would be like interacting with an item, or perhaps it can be, like I have a couple of universal downtimes, maybe that's something like, in a way to get some ideas. But usually at the end of the day, you're using the existing resolution system, which is drawing cards, throwing dice, or whatever, and assigning some sort of statistical attribute to that. Make those edge cases as simple as possible, is what I say. Generally, if the system has skills, just make another skill. 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the correct call. Questions? Over here.
So I got a bit confused by your presentation. While you were speaking, you said each time around the table should be about an hour, but the slideshow said each encounter should be about an hour.
Excuse me, that is a bad on my part then. Probably what I meant to say is like encounters can be as short as 1 hour, you'll be surprised. But it is, I did intend 1 hour around the table is what I've seen most commonly reported from other DMs in my own experience.
So combat would be a few hours for a few rounds?
Often, yes, combat can be about an hour a round. That's a good way to schedule it. Have other things to do just in case. Have at least one other thing planned for the night, just in case things go horribly right or horribly wrong. You never know. But yeah, that's usually how I budget my time, and it usually goes very well.
Thank you.
Question?
One is,
that people, some players, students, like it when I was at that time I was stuttering. That kind of turned away. Is there a way to fix that?
Players turning away due to a stuttering issue. Unfortunately, that's kind of like people. Ways that you can get around that, I mean, we could take speech out entirely. There are play-by-post games where you do everything by text. If your players don't like that, and that's something about you as a person, unfortunately, we're going to have to get a different group. Some people are more accommodating than not. I believe there could be speech therapies and so forth, but I think that's getting a little bit beyond what I should be telling you on how to run your games.
I was also that when I was DMing and the players, I had to start off at a very low level, and the one battle was like a very strong NPC, and another situation that was my idea was like in a situation just try to have a random NPC come by and just like chuck them out of the bag itself. Is that fine?
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite thing to do with low-level players is to make them fight God. Because either you can do this by they have to be really smart with the environment around them, or perhaps again, hey, let's establish the stakes of the setting. Hey, there are things far, far, far bigger than you, and this is an example of what happens when one of them just looks at you funny.
I just had like that would come out of nowhere, and then you can break the fourth wall.
Yeah, and that's fine. You can do that, but again, let the players feel like they maybe either came out of something with that. We're like, yeah, we really got one up on that guy, or you can do it where it's like, hey, I'm gonna punish you all real quick for a second. I'm gonna show you the whip of like how bad the setting can get, but make it a fast encounter where it's like, okay, the character does this thing. Oh wow, you guys are really weak. Move on. Don't let them feel down in the dumps for too long, unless that's like the point of the campaign. Any other questions?